Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Barry. I'm the councillor for Linden Lanes Ward 7, and welcome to our community meeting tonight dealing with the Willdale Crescent and 26th Street reconstruction project that's going to take place this summer. In the room with us tonight, I will introduce, we have Patrick Pulak, who is the General Manager of Development Services here at the City of Brandon, Mark Allard, who is the Director of Engineering Services, Kyle Winters, who's the Acting Manager of Infrastructure, Pete Schmoulin, who is a Senior Network Administrator, Mary Lee Price, who's going to be doing the moderating here and looking after the questions coming in later, and she's the Corporate Communications Officer here for the City of Brandon, has done a lot of work for us to help this thing get set up, so I do appreciate all the work that her and Pete have done. And I also have with me Bruce Lupke, who's helping us. He's the councillor for South Centre Ward here in Brandon, helping us control the cameras now for the meeting. So with that, I do want to remind everybody again, this meeting tonight is about the Willdale Crescent and 26th Street reconstruction. We want to maintain our focus on that as the presentation and that as the questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Lee right away here, and she's going to kind of give you some answers as to how you can call in with your questions or type them in for us. Mary Lee?
Yes, good evening. Following the presentation by Engineering Services, we will take questions with the participants that have joined this call via Microsoft Teams. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Please remember that this meeting is not an open ward meeting, but it is focused on the construction that will be happening on Willowdale and 26th Street.
Thank you very much, Mary Lee. And with that, I'm going to turn it over right away to Mark Allard, who's going to be doing the presentation that you'll see on your screens or on WCGTV if you're watching from there or listening audio through a telephone and that. So, Mark?
Thanks, Sean, and good evening, everybody. I've got about a dozen slides here that I'll walk the public through, identifying some of the work that we'll be doing on Willowdale Crescent and 26th Street. Involves surface reconstruction, some drainage, some water main stuff, and some pathways that'll be constructed. If you'll allow me, I'll complete the presentation. I think that's easiest given the format that we're in. Taking questions after the fact. Myself and Kyle and possibly Patrick, the three of us will do our best to address the questions that you have. So the first slide here is simply an aerial image of Willowdale Crescent and 26th Street. Am I missing a mouse somewhere? How am I doing this?
Mouse?
I don't know. Where's our techie guy? My apologies for a moment here. I'm missing a key piece of technology.
Here, you take one of these. You got it?
Okay, technology is a wonderful thing when it works. Okay, so we should be good. So maybe we'll kick off from the start here, as we never really got too far into it. So again, an aerial image of Willowdale Crescent and 26th Street. The very top of the slide there, you'll see the drain and the rail line up in the north part of the image. These red lines that I've drawn on here are basically just the limits of the project on Willowdale and the piece of 26th, which is basically the intersection and the piece north that will allow us to incorporate replacement of the through grade pipes through 26th. So a little bit about the need for the project. First of all, the pavement condition, having to assess what the pavement condition is and some of the failures that were occurring there. Intersection operations, there's 3 intersections that we'll talk about as we go through the presentation here today. I mentioned the pathways or active transportation along Willowdale Crescent. There will be a water main replacement through this area, and again, focus on a little bit of land drainage. So when we look at reconstruction of the pavement, typically we focus on a 20-year design life for the pavement, so that'll be incorporated into the project. We look at different operational characteristics of the roadways and intersections. I'll briefly touch on some of those operational characteristics and what our focus is on. Intersection analysis to ensure the intersections are functioning properly, have a good level of service, and certainly deal with providing safe traffic movements for the motoring public. Improve active transportation corridor, something key within the city of Brandon. The number of users we have from active transportation and pedestrians, that type of stuff, so a key focus for us. Focusing on a new water main, and those water mains should provide us 80 plus years of service, and a set of new through grades that will go under 26th Street, just north of the Willowdale intersection. So from a roadway perspective, we often use a rating model, and it's simplistic, but it works. Good, fair, and poor. And both sections of Willowdale and 26 that we're talking about have been assessed or classified as poor condition. If they were good or fair, we might do some other sort of a treatment. When they're in a poor condition, we typically go into a reconstruction mode. As we reconstruct and we get down below the asphalt surface into the base course, it then allows us other opportunities to focus on some of the operational characteristics, such as possibly changing the cross-section, looking at parking, is there transit use today or in the future, the road alignment, is there opportunity to change the road alignment. Obviously, you can change the configuration of your intersections if you're reconstructing, so a little bit of focus on that. And again, reconstruction, because we're taking the surface totally off, it makes sense to look at some of the other underground utilities and replace those where necessary. From street operational characteristics, Willowdale Crescent is classified as a collector street. So as an example, 18th Street or 34th Street would be identified as arterial roads, which are the main thoroughfares in Brandon. You go down to a collector network. Collector networks typically feed arterial roads, and both 26th and Willowdale are identified as collector streets. And then you have your local streets, which typically feed into the collectors, and that's where the majority of your residential accesses are and that type of stuff onto the streets. So Willowdale is a collector. We can focus on traffic calming. Typically, when you've got long arterials or long collectors, sometimes it's nice to have traffic calming devices or traffic calming approaches. You can accomplish that through maybe a narrower road cross-section, or even in some instances, a substandard curve, so a little bit of a sharper curve than you might normally want to handle can sometimes calm your traffic, or in other words, slow the speed of your traffic along that route. Opportunities to look at reduced on-street parking, again, where that's required. Sometimes we look at a narrower pavement for capital costs and maintenance costs. We look at narrower pavements to support pedestrian crossings so they're not crossing a great big wide pavement. It becomes a little bit unsafe at that point. So those are aspects that we're looking at when we look at the operational characteristics. And certainly, I think there was once transit service on there. Today, I understand there is no transit service, but potentially in the future, if that is restored, we want to focus on the opportunity to accommodate transit. Specifically on the intersection improvements or an intersection analysis, some of the key considerations that we focus on are the road classification, as I have just touched on, traffic volumes and traffic movement. So where is the majority of traffic coming from, going to? What types of movements are they making through that intersection? Traffic type, or what we refer to as a design vehicle. So what is the largest vehicle that you might anticipate utilizing that intersection from a perspective of constructing radiuses on curbs or tracking of the vehicles and that type of stuff. So we do look at traffic type. And obviously, in the overall scenario, it's about looking at intersection safety. So just to go back on the road classification, I can touch on this a little bit, but recognizing that Willowdale is a collector, Silver Birch is considered a local road in the city of Brandon, and Willowdale and 26th are both collectors at that particular intersection. So we've looked at a couple of options for the Willowdale Crescent and Silver Birch Drive. Today, you would notice that Willowdale Crescent eastbound has a stop condition. This is kind of contrary to good traffic engineering and traffic practice, where the priority road, the higher classification, or the collector in this case, would have the right of way, and you would introduce a stop condition on Silver Birch entering onto Willowdale Crescent. Because of the configuration and a three-legged intersection, one of the features that we've put on here is a right turn cutoff from Silver Birch onto Willowdale, and then it transitions into a merge onto Willowdale Crescent as you continue, I guess, north and east in this situation. The truly only stop condition is from Silver Birch entering Willowdale Crescent as you may be taking a left-hand maneuver or going west on Willowdale. The other piece that we've designed into here is a protected left turn slot. So there's room for a couple of vehicles that are coming west on Willowdale to turn south onto Silver Birch. They can pull into that protected lane and wait until it's clear from oncoming traffic to make that maneuver onto Silver Birch. The other option that was presented is a roundabout. This roundabout, I think, is a little bit smaller than the ones that you might see at Willowdale and 34th or Richmond and 34th. A roundabout itself acts as a calming, I refer to them as a calming device, but I don't think that's quite a calming feature, I guess, a traffic calming feature, where traffic has to slow down to enter the roundabout, and then they can pick up speed, they can accelerate it as they leave. In this scenario, the priority is equal on both Willowdale and on Silver Birch. So one isn't given priority over the other. I think the thing that we're trying to, I guess, move away from is the existing condition where Silver Birch is the actual stop or the through condition and Willowdale is the stop condition. That's kind of contrary to the engineering that we use today. I think at this point, city's preference is option 1. However, I do flag option 2, which introduces kind of a traffic calming scenario. This is the intersection at Willowdale Crescent and Ash Grove Boulevard. Again, Willowdale Crescent being the priority road, Ash Grove coming to a stop condition. We do have a right turn cutoff, which I imagine is a yield and a merge into that lane, again with a stop condition if you are going through and west onto Willowdale. Both on Willowdale, eastbound and westbound, are protected turning lanes to go south onto Ash Grove or north into the small strip mall or business area on the north side of Willowdale Crescent. This is the intersection at Willowdale Crescent and 26th Street. Not a lot of change in this other than as you go east on Brandon Avenue, there is a bit of a raised median separating eastbound and westbound, and we're trying to clear up the alignment of the lanes the best we can given the right-of-way configurations there. But for the most part, I don't think you'll see a whole lot of change at this Willowdale Crescent and 26th intersection. Active transportation or the multi-use trails. Our intention is to complete the trail or the connection between 34th and 26th Street, which for the most part resides on the south side of Willowdale Crescent. Keeping in mind pedestrian safety, if we look at the intersection of, maybe I'll even go back here one. If you look at this intersection, there was a pedestrian crossing at this location north-south on Willowdale. We're proposing to remove that simply from the fact of that's a very substandard curve, and even some of the pedestrians may in fact be hidden as a result of that. So our intention is to move the pedestrian crossing, I guess, south and west to kind of midpoint between Ash Grove and Silver Birch. Again, with narrowing of the pavement widths and putting it mid-street, we feel that that's one of the safer locations to have the pedestrians cross in this area. Obviously, there's accommodation for school connectivity. Many children in the area going to and from school. The focus on active living, and this allows us to cross 26th Street and continue our extension at some point in the future on to 18. So water main replacement. Is that today, Kyle, 300 mil?
Yeah, it's an existing 300.
Yeah, so there's an existing 300 mil cast iron and ductile iron pipe that's there. It's reached its service life of 50 years. One of the ways we kind of rate the condition of the water mains are the number of repairs that we end up doing. And recently, I understand they've done 3 repairs there. So it creates its own issues of having old infrastructure and having to deal with old infrastructure. So hopefully with replacement of the water main, will be good for many years to come. This is a slide on drainage and drainage specific to the limits of this project. So today there are 2 corrugated metal pipes that exist through 26th Street. They were arch pipes, so 675 millimeters tall and 1,075 millimeters wide, so they form kind of that arch shape. They're going to be replaced by two 1050s or 1,050 millimeter reinforced concrete pipes. The two benefits here are one, the hydraulic efficiency of a concrete pipe versus the corrugated metal pipe is increased, so you can get a little bit more flow through the pipe just as a result of the type of material and the walls of the interior walls of the pipe, as well as the end area or the pipe sizes in general are a little bit bigger. So we're able to push a little bit more water through there. We got to recognize the fact that we can't get too big because a little bit further downstream, we're limited by the pipe that goes underground currently at 22nd Street. So no doubt there will be impacts to local residents. I'm a believer that things get worse before they get better, but when they are better, hopefully they serve the intended need. We expect that there will be traffic delays at certain times of the day on certain days. There will be lane closures, and we'll go through a little bit of a phasing approach on how we see the work rolling out. As a result of lane closures, there could be route detours that we put in place. There may be temporary access issues into and out of private properties, and with the water main replacement, there is sure to be temporary water shut off during that period. So here, these are the construction phases that we're proposing and are going to propose in the tender document that we put out. So our first priority would be replacement of the pipes through 26th Street, identifying that as phase one. We then move on to southbound 26th Street. And at a similar time, we may be able to undertake phase three of the eastbound of Willowdale. Once those are completed to a point that we can resurface the tops of the road, we would flip over and look to do phase four or northbound 26th and westbound Willowdale. I'll draw your attention to, we think when we're doing phase three, we can handle two-way traffic in the darker area or the westbound lanes. But once phase three is completed and we take on phase five, we don't think we can handle two-way traffic on the newly constructed piece of Willowdale. So that's more where I referred to a route detour. We may have to go down 26th onto Poplar and work our way back up onto Willowdale Crescent. But for now, those are the five phasings that we're proposing to undertake the work. Just a little bit on construction timelines. So we're just wanted to get through this process, take any feedback from the residents that we can today, try our best to implement pieces of that into the tender and go out to tender in May. Aggressively, we're hoping to start construction in June. And I'll draw your attention to final completion in July of 2022. And just hold your thoughts for a minute. I'll come back to that. I've identified that our priority on pipes are through 26th Street, so that's where our focus will first be. And there'll be surfacing following each phase, but we won't complete it to top of final lift. It's our thoughts that we may not be able to put the top lift of asphalt on until the summer of 2022. So that completion may only take a couple of days to surface that area. However, our winter shutdown come fall is going to be dependent on where we are in the phases of work. We want to be cautious not to start phase 5 and have it at a gravel surface and have the winter shut us down where we have to deal with curbs and gutters and no asphalt pavement. We also don't want to be forced to paving when it's minus 10 degrees. So our intention is that the only work left in the summer of 2022 will be final lift of asphalt, which again should only take a couple of days. However, we're limited to the control we have on schedule given weather and those types of things, and we'll just have to play that by ear as we go into the fall to see what truly we'll be faced with in the summer of 2022. Again, I'll emphasize our hopes are just to complete top lift of asphalt. So I'll leave it at that. Questions and future questions with contacts. I put my name and Kyle's name up there. That number is basically the general office number, so you're welcome to call at any time in the future to have some further discussions. But I guess it's fair at this time to open up the floor, and Marilee, I guess you can do your magic with questions. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark, for a very thorough and informative presentation. So I'm going to turn it back over to Marilee again for a second. She's going to explain how you can either call in or text us in with your questions, and she will moderate them as to bringing them forth here as to who they're for and what the question is. So Marilee, I'll get you again to go through the rules as we speak.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Barry. So this meeting is open for questions from residents on regarding the construction that's happening in the Willowdale and 26th Street. If you are on the Teams virtual call, we invite you to raise your hand or put your question in the chat if you wish to ask a question. Once we are finished with everyone in the Teams, we will go to those who have called in and dialed in. And when it's your turn to dial in, you'll need to press *6 to unmute yourself. So are there any questions right now in those who have joined on the Teams call? Yes, Mr. Campbell, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, more of a comment other than a question. I was glad to hear there was another option other than a roundabout at that intersection. It looks as though you're kind of adding lanes there, because I was going to suggest why don't we just put in a couple more stop signs and make it a three-way stop, which would be both calming and save some money. But it looks like the project is a bit bigger than that. I also applaud the fact that if you're going to close the entrance to that strip mall by that corner there, because that was a rather precarious intersection with that opening there when you're making a left onto Ash Grove and somebody wants to make a left into the mall. So I applaud your efforts, and I think it all looks very good. I'm very pleased with what you've come up with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Does anyone else on our Teams call have a question? Feel free to raise your hand or put your comments in the chat. Right, we will go to our those who have called in, who have dialed into this Teams call. If you have a question, please hit *6 to unmute yourself.
Alicia, aren't you asking?
Hello.
If you have a question,
Sorry, I can't quite hear you. Can you press *6 to unmute yourself? Not seeing any raised hands at this point, Councillor Barry.
Okay, thank you, Mary Lee. I'm just going to give people a couple minutes to think, because I know there was more questions I was expecting tonight from residents that have talked to me over the past while. And please either, put your hand up to ask your question or call in, as Mary Lee had mentioned. We're open to discussion. I see that Cher has one there, so maybe I'll just pass it back over to you for now. So.
Thank you. Ms. Cher has asked.
Please either put your hand up and ask a question or call in.
The delay. The question is, will there be emergency and ambulance access to Silver Birch throughout the construction?
Yeah, typically in these types of scenarios where we have lane closures, road closures, we'll be working with emergency services, so they understand the timing of our road closures, and they're well aware of the detour routes or access routes into the various locations. Staff will also have their own emergency response plans should that type of situation occur. And we have to get emergency personnel into certain areas. So both of those scenarios I can see being covered through Summers Construction.
I'm hearing someone talk. If you have a question and you're on the phone, please dial or hit *6 to unmute yourself.
Hello,
Hello.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure. What is your name?
My name is Wendy.
Hi, Wendy. Go ahead with your
My
question.
question is the culvert and the and the size of them. I have a question.
Okay.
My
And
name is
size. Wendy. Sorry, we're just getting a lot of
My question
feedback. 1 second.
My question is culvert and my question is the size of the culvert. This is ridiculous.
Okay. The size of the culvert.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I guess I'm not clear what your question is, other than the size of the culvert. So I can certainly take opportunity to discuss that. We do recognize that the existing culverts that are there today are in poor condition. We understand that recently some of the culverts have been obstructed. That has been mitigated to this point. However, I guess it's the replacement and the size of the new culverts. We feel that given the downstream hydrology, both the ditch and the closed pipe network that goes in at 22nd Street, that the new proposed pipes under 26th are appropriately sized at this time.
What's the size?
2 1050s. The existings are 695 by 1075 arches.
So it's an increase.
It is an increase, again. The end area of the pipes will be larger. The hydraulic efficiencies of those pipes going from a corrugated metal pipe to a concrete pipe will be increased. So it may not be great, but there is increased hydraulic capacity through those pipes from what the original ones were designed.
We have a question in the chat from Alicia, and the question is, what is the plan for when the heavy rains come and that pipe is exposed in the middle of construction for the flow of water? Our basements are no longer an option. Thanks.
Mark?
Well, no,
I can take that one. During installation, there'll actually be a wide open trench cut through 26th Street, so flow would actually more hydraulic capacity there than if there was actually.
I'm just going to follow up on Kyle's comments there. Kyle, based on that information, that knowing last year we had a bit of a collapse in the sidewalk there right above those culverts on 26th Street, is that a concern if we're going to have that wide open, that if we ever get some heavy rains or falls again, that whole side of the street might come down? Or
That side of the street will actually be excavated as well. We'll be cutting right through 26th Street.
Okay, so
We'll be repairing
it should
all
be
that as
alleviated by that? Okay.
We have another question in the chat from Cher. What about the school bus that accommodates children in wheelchairs and special needs that runs daily on Silver Birch Drive? How is that going to be accommodated?
Prior to construction, we'll be sitting down with the school division and going over bus routes. We'll address that with their staff, make sure that there's availability there.
Early, I'm just going to jump in again here for a second. I know there was a question that was out there while we're waiting on others. Question for either Kyle or Mark here. Some of the businesses are concerned that the construction might interrupt flow into their businesses, like Blue Moon Water, the barber shop, 7-Eleven, and that. Do we have plans in place that there will be access to those places basically uninterrupted over the summer while we're working on that area?
Absolutely. Through the different phases that Mark kind of walked you through, there'll either be access available off of 26th Street or off of Willowdale Crescent. In some cases, maybe.
Thank you.
And we will attempt to keep our communications open with those business owners to, let them know of our plans and when there may be, an interruption to traffic. And again, we're going to make every effort to keep accesses open so they can get to your business. But we'll be in constant communication with you folks.
Cher has another question. Are the drains on the street going to be made bigger? The drains are small and plug up crazy fast.
We will be adding drains to the area just to pick up surface drainage there off the road. We won't be able to increase sizes; those are standard sizes. We are looking at different lid styles potentially that would allow for
Again, really sorry to interrupt, but just to carry out on that, Kyle, where are we possibly looking at maybe adding more catch basins and that to alleviate that type of problem?
the Ash Grove intersection, for one. We'd like to add another couple into that area. There's been flooding there in the past, so try to address that.
Are we looking at adding any more further up the street, like on either on Ash Grove or on Elmdale or any place like that this summer that might catch the water further up? Anything in the projects there?
Not at this time, no. We're just focusing on the project that's outlined there in the presentation.
Okay.
Amber has put a question in the chat. Is this the one and only plan from 2021 to 2022 to stop the flooding along the railway tracks and streets on Willdale, or is there another plan in addition to this? Heading insurance this year in Brandon, we were told this area was a high risk of flooding. Will this change with the new plans?
On?
Yep.
Okay, this is Patrick Pulak answering the question. So one of the things that we do recognize is that there's multiple contributions from various sources into this area for surface drainage. And as I've said to some of the people in the past, some of the residents in the past, one of the areas that we're looking at mitigating the flows is some of those flows from Brookwood, some of those flows that are coming from further upstream of Linden Lanes in that area. So this is part and parcel of a larger effort to control drainage in this area. So even though this project that we're discussing today looks at drainage, it's just one piece of the puzzle. So there are other things that we're currently working on to try and mitigate those flows.
Any other questions coming through yet there, Mary Lee?
Not yet.
Not seen any yet? Just while we're waiting in, Mark, maybe I could just, we've had this discussion, but maybe just, again, remind folks that this is going to be a summer-long construction. This is not a 1 or 2 month project. To be patient, again, you know, good things come to those who wait, so to speak, and that, but short-term pain for long-term gain. We've been waiting a while to get this done. But again, I want to remind people, and Mark will touch on this, is this is a project that's going to take us right from basically the start of summer right till fall, much as what phase 1 did. And I know how many calls engineering got and how many I got in September, October when we ran into problems with weather and it getting done. So I just want people to be prepared. This is going to be a long project. Maybe Mark, you might want to touch on that a bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I get the other approach to it, I guess, is to close everything all together and don't do it so much in phasing, but take it on as one big challenge that obviously creates other sorts of issues as far as total shutdown of some fairly major roadways in the city. And virtue of the fact that we're also introducing underground works, utility works, that being water mains and the culverts, adds to the complexity of the project, adds to the timelines of the project. So you kind of add all those together and phase the project out. Unfortunately, it will take a good majority of the summer. If we're going to have the drought that people are talking about, not only from a flooding perspective, but from a construction perspective, that will certainly be of benefit to us. But as I say, my hopes are that we tackle 90-95% of it this year, get everything covered up with asphalt, which leaves a final lift of asphalt for the following summer.
Great. We have 2 questions in the chat. The first one is from Cher. Would you be willing to bring in city workers or contract workers to help when the skies open up and the water levels are rising in the area?
I guess I can try that. I think. Go ahead, Patrick.
I guess. I mean, I guess I'm not sure what the intent of the question is, or what you're getting at in the question. So I'm gonna answer it the way I think you're asking. In the event that we have, one of the things that we've done, and like we do in every event of the sort like we had back in June of last year, is we try to come after the event, we debrief to have a discussion as to kind of lessons learned. And certainly one of the, certainly knowing what happened in that magnitude of storm, there are things that we feel that we can do differently. And so what I can say, and I don't have kind of like the plan that came out of those discussions, but certainly our response would be different than how we responded back in June of last year. So yes, that does involve bringing in city workers. Usually, the other thing is we're trying to be proactive. We know we're getting into a situation where there's an opportunity for large storms. We're trying to be proactive and get out there and prepare for these kind of events. So, just off the cuff, that kind of what I can share with you right now. Certainly always open to have those discussions. This usually comes out, I'm with engineering. The response that I'm talking about is really an operations response. So certainly if you want to have more of those conversations, those can be had, and I would certainly bring in operations into that discussion, because they're the ones that would really be out in these type of events.
Right. Our next question is from Amber. The concrete culvert, what kind of increase are we talking about? Is it 1,000 liters an hour, 5 liters an hour? An increase of what size from what?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have those numbers here with me at this time. If you're so willing, it's something that we can get an answer and respond to you. Maybe if somehow you can pass contact information on to Mary Lee, we'd be happy to gather that information and provide it back to you. I unfortunately just don't have it present with me here today. But again, just to emphasize that we look at the end area or the opening size of the pipe, and although it's not great, there is an increase in opening size, and then the call it the friction, I guess, or the hydraulic loss due to friction along the walls of the pipe. A corrugated pipe, which is kind of that rippled effect versus a straight concrete smooth wall, you certainly increase your hydraulic capacity. I do want to emphasize, though, we are limited to what downstream of the pipes can handle. We're not at this time proposing any changes to the channel cross section or to the pipes further down at 22nd Street, which eventually take on that flow. So we are limited, but I can certainly provide you a little bit more information offline.
Right. Our next question in the chat is from Alicia. With the trench being the answer to my question, when the area is open, can we count on the city staff to be there to monitor the levels when heavy rains come?
Yeah, I think if this goes back to the question about having an open trench during construction, we recognize that those situations are a little bit higher risk, but it is inevitable that we need to take on that method of construction and have the trenches open. I think in such an event, you're likely to have the contractors there, you're likely to have the engineering staff there to make sure that the water will flow through the site and that we're not creating additional damage to the road adjacent to the opening or that type of stuff. So yes, in that type of an event, I would strongly expect that there would be both contractor and city staff there.
Very good. I have asked Amber to send her contact information to mediainquiry@brandon.ca, and then when we get that, I will forward that on to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mary Lee, I'm just going to jump in here with a quick question that's been on everybody's mind. It hasn't been asked yet. I'm quite surprised, but this is kind of open to any one of the engineers as it is an engineering question. A lot of people in the Willowdale area, especially along the cul-de-sacs here in the creek and that, have been flooded due to heavy rains on several occasions with water backing up through the basements and everything else, and caused significant amount of dollar damage. With this project, with replacing the culverts on 26th Street and increasing the drainage a bit, in your minds as professionals, do you feel this is going to help alleviate some of that problem with what we've witnessed or experienced in the past? I know last year with the 150 millimeter rains, that's kind of an exceptional day, but the feeling is still that it wouldn't have been as bad if the ditch had been clean and the culverts had been open and working properly, because we've experienced down in that area, especially along Willowdale by Forest and Evergreen, even on 40 and 50 millimeter rains, the catch basins are backing up, the ditch is backing up, waters are coming up into the yard. So do you feel with this project we're doing there that it's going to alleviate some of the problem or a lot of the problem, or get that water flowing better, so maybe we won't see that happening when we even get just a 40, 50, 60 millimeter rain? I'm not even talking about the 150s. I'm talking about the ones that are less than half of that. And just if I can get your feedback on you on that one.
I'll answer that one. Again, kind of as I alluded to earlier, if it's hard to look at just one component and say that one component is going to help. But certainly I think what Mark has alluded to in his description of how there's a slight increase, we're looking at reducing kind of the friction between the water and the pipe wall, which helps move the water faster. So yeah, there is an improvement, I think, in the movement of water to move it down the ditch through to the intake into the storm sewer system at 22nd Street. What I want to highlight, though, is that's just one piece of the puzzle, and like I was saying earlier, one of the things we're trying to do is slow down the inundation of water into the ditch in the first place. And part of that is looking at the water that's coming from Brookwood, looking at the water that's coming down east or west of 34th, seeing what we can do to mitigate those flows, slow it down, so that we're not just having a rush of water into the system. And usually when, and I agree with you, and I think I said that last summer to the residents, was that this storm that we were looking at was a significant storm, a very significant storm. In fact, the largest storm that we've ever encountered. Not much we can do in that type of event, but if we're seeing problems and issues at lower storms, that's something we have to look at. And so kind of, as I've said, we're looking at all those contributions into this one catchment area and how we can slow down those flows so that we can kind of do a controlled drainage of the area rather than just an inrush.
Sean, some of the conversations we had earlier, and I wasn't a resident of Brandon in June and July last year when we had those events, and just some of the pieces that I've put together. When you looked at the condition of the inlet at 22nd Street. You looked at the obstruction that was in the pipe through 26th. You look at maybe some of the growth that there has been in the past in the ditch, whether it's willow or cattail. All of that stuff impedes the flow of water. And I think the fact that the city has now addressed those three issues, and I think have learned from the last event on what potentially could happen, I'm somewhat confident that we're in a better position to handle those runoff events. I agree with Patrick. A 6, 7, 8 inch rainfall event, it's very difficult to build infrastructure to handle those types of events. The revenues that would be required to construct and maintain that type of infrastructure is extreme. But I think in the circumstances that we face today, given where we were a year from now, I truly believe the city is in a much better position.
All right, we have a couple questions in the chat. The first one is from Tyler. Elmdale had new water mains and repaving for a long period of one summer, and then 2 summers later, we had our streets closed down again to do new curbs and narrow our road. Is this project something that will be thoroughly considered so all things can be done in one closure period?
Absolutely, yes. As you kind of seen from the presentation, we're looking at water main replacement, sidewalks, road, everything. So, yeah, after the fact.
When we talk about narrowing our roadway widths and that type of stuff, that'll mean, a change to the curb and gutter. So yeah, you'll basically a total renewal is what you should recognize at the end of it.
All right, our next question is from Melissa. Is there a plan to keep the culverts clear from debris once they are replaced?
This is Patrick speaking, and I'm speaking on behalf of operations here. Certainly, as I mentioned, we debriefed after that last storm event. Lessons learned that, yeah, there was an obstruction within the culverts. The difficulty was the culverts were partially collapsed, and that was impeding our ability to clean it. I think that's why we've gone to concrete this time, and certainly operations is keenly aware that they need to keep those culverts clean. So that's where this proactive approach comes. If we know we have the potential for a large event, we're proactively going in there and ensuring those culverts or that pipe is clear before we have the event, but also it's part of a regular maintenance schedule. So again, I'm speaking on behalf of operations here, and that was my takeaway from those conversations we were having last year.
Our next question is from Alicia. Are drains still going to be added up on Elmdale? If so, when will this be done? Are you increasing the design to handle storm events? This is still unclear.
We will not be as part of this project, but it is one of the options that Patrick has kind of alluded to that we're looking at for future projects.
Well, and I would just add is, I know what you're referring to, and certainly, as I said, we were looking at considerations in other areas. That's part of it, the catch basins further up, rather than all that water coming from north of Linden Lanes and coming down into the Willowdale area, looking at capturing those and diverting them. That's part and parcel of what we're looking at. Unfortunately, that's not something we don't think we can get done this year, just because we're doing other improvements to other areas that were impacted as well. So, it's something I think we're looking at next year.
All right, our next question is from Cher. My concern is that the majority of tenders will be awarded to a small handful of businesses that have too many work projects on the go and not enough manpower. Other than the financial implications, what will the city do over and above to get those people to get the jobs done in a timely fashion?
That's certainly a challenge within all construction industries. I think fortunate for us already, one of the first paving contracts that we tendered has been awarded to a contractor from the city of Winnipeg. So there should be a little bit more capacity remaining within the city of Brandon, and one of the things that we are considering is maybe a sub-completion date. I know drainage, obviously, from my understanding of working here with the city for a while now, and based on this conversation we're having here today, that drainage is a huge issue. So there is the potential that we can put a sub-completion date in a contract with a penalty failing to meet that sub-completion date. One of the only hammers we have are financial penalties. And it becomes difficult to force a contractor to do certain things. They bid the job in such a way that we anticipate that they're going to control a schedule and complete it prior to a completion date. The only action the city really has is to instill penalty that deters them from delaying too much. There are obviously several other things that we're typically not in control of, things such as weather. But we are looking at, in this particular case, the potential of a sub-completion date for the drainage portion of it anyway.
I don't have any more questions in the chat. If anyone's on the phone and has a question to ask, please press *6 to unmute yourself.
And maybe while we're waiting, Mary Lee, I'll just kind of jump in here for a second and have the councillors' 2 cents that only a few people ever want to hear. Most of them don't want to hear it, but I'm going to put in my little bit of chip here. Over the course of last fall, especially with the group of residents from Evergreen and Forest, and I'm talking about Alicia and Wendy and John and that, we've had quite a few meetings with both in administration, both with engineering, with Patrick before Mark came on board, and with Public Works regarding the maintenance of the ditch and that. I think everybody realizes that it's been a bit of a hard push. It's had to be to get some things done, but I think we're starting to see some things maybe heading in the right direction. My hope is that doing the culverts and doing the other things that are going on are going to help alleviate this problem, but if I had a crystal ball, I'd be able to tell you that, and I don't. So all we can do is do the work that's scheduled, hope for the best, and hope that the rains stay at a minimum when they do come down to that, because we don't need these heavy rains anymore. That being said, as Mark pointed out, we've got several projects going on in the city this year, probably one of our biggest budgets for infrastructure yet. So Linden Lanes is just one piece of it. And I just want to kind of remind people that as much as it is an inconvenience for some of us when we're either traveling to work or like myself going to get my coffee at 7-Eleven, we might be taking a little bit of a different route or a different path. It does get a little frustrating, but again, the short-term pain hopefully will be for the long-term game and all. And just I'm asking folks this summer to just be a little bit patient. I know 2 years ago we went through this in Willowdale with the construction. There were some delays, and then the weather came in September, which really caused a pain in the behind on this project because of the rains. We couldn't do anything for a while. But we're really hoping that things will get done in a timely fashion this year. I have had this discussion with both engineering and previously last fall with operations and that. And even though we're starting the work, it's not a discussion that we're just going to drop. We're going to continue to kind of keep an eye on things and have the talks that we need to talk with the people involved in that, and hopefully get this done in a timely manner. And that, again, I'm just asking folks for your patience, and certainly your comments are always appreciated. And again, as Mark had pointed out, he did leave the phone number for engineering if you have any questions that you can call in and ask him. And I see we got a couple more questions here, so I'll turn it back to Mary Lee.
Right. So our first question here is from Gary. What is the cost estimate for this project?
Given the different factors, we haven't tallied up for each piece of infrastructure, but I believe we're in the 1.5 to 1.7
$1 million. Okay.
Right. Our next question is from Keith Campbell. In this area, do we have separate storm and sanitation sewers, or is it all in one?
They are separate. The storm sewer system and domestic sewer system are completely separate in this area.
The question here from Tyler. I feel like there's an unspoken priority that drainage is the biggest issue in this neighborhood. I don't want to take away from the importance of crosswalk safety and collector roads versus local roads, but I think without a massive push for drainage improvements, that our real estate values and neighborhood desirability will diminish substantially. This isn't a question, just a very big exclamation point.
And you know what, I'm just going to, I just wanted to comment on that comment. I think Councillor Barry alluded to it. This is not the only area in the city where we're doing drainage works. Certainly, you know, it's not in the dry seasons do we understand where our drainage problems are. It's when we have storms. Unfortunately, last year the storm was of incredible magnitude, but it's when we have these storms that we really understand where our issues are. There was a lot of takeaway from last year storm as to where some of the issues are, and we're doing, I would say that drainage is not only a priority for this area, it's a priority for the entire city. And we've had to reevaluate what our priorities are from an infrastructure point of view so that we can better redirect resources into drainage. And I think that's reflected in our budget this year, will be reflected in our budget for the next 5 to 10 years, continuing drainage improvements. And yeah, that's just my comment.
And if I could just add on to that, Mary Lee, if I could. I'm just going to add into that the city and the council at budget time this year, we did add several hundreds of thousands of dollars to not only positions, but also to the work being done in the city for overland flooding, draining, and that. And part of that has to do with basically the maintenance and the ongoing issue with drainage and that. And the place to contact is actually Public Works. This is more tonight just about the engineering and construction work that we're going to be dealing with. But I just want to let people know that the Public Works number is 204-729-2285. That's primarily who you want to contact if there's issues with catch basins backing up or overland flooding or issues. They've actually hired a manager this year that is responsible for that. They've actually got a sole person that's overseeing that, which we didn't have last year. And I just want to suggest to people that if we do have events this summer that come up, that we're having some rains that are causing some backups in some streets and areas like that. The number to call, again, 204-729-2285, and talk to Public Works. It's not an engineering thing at that point. It's more of a, as like had mentioned in the previous comments here, we need to get help out from the city workers and that to help with these things. And we haven't had it tested yet, and I really hope we don't, but if we do, that's the number we're going to be calling and trying to get the people out to help. And again, Linden Lanes has been hit hard, but we're not the only area in the city that is facing this problem. So again, I ask for people's patience and understanding when we're dealing with that. And I know over the last 15 years, this area has been hit hard and people have been very patient. And like I said, going forward, we're hoping to alleviate some of these problems now and move forward so that people can actually sleep easy at night every time they start to hear the rain pelleting on the roof and that, and they don't have to get up and panic to make sure their basements aren't flooding and that. So.
Very good. Tyler has another comment here, and he says he appreciates the effort in our neighborhood. It's nice to see the annual improvements. Thanks to everyone for the hard work and the future efforts. We have another question from Amber. Is there anything in the budget for the next 10 years for the upkeep of the drains, or is it all for the construction?
I will, again, that is a operations consideration, and one thing I will emphasize that Councillor Barry, and in fact Councillor Barry stated, and in fact all of Council supports, is re-emphasizing on operations the need to maintain our drainage system. So it's not necessarily, on one hand, as a development services or engineering, we deal with new infrastructure, the replacement of infrastructure. Operations, on the other hand, deals with the maintenance of that infrastructure. So whether it's ditches, pipes, catch basins, Council has made it known through this last set of deliberations, or this last deliberations, that the drainage maintenance, drainage infrastructure maintenance is a priority, and they have shown that through how they've amended the budget.
They actually got a question here via text.
Oh.
The question is from Wendy, and it says, will culverts at 26th Street have grates on them?
No, we don't have plans to install grates on. We're looking at potentially a chain link fence around the ditch. That's how we'd like to keep people away from the inlets there.
Okay, so we're looking at a chain link fence around that area as opposed to putting gates on the culverts then?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any more questions. Before I kind of close it off, I'm just going to turn it back over to Mark and Kyle and Patrick to see if they have any closing comments before we kind of close things off here. So, Mark, I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate everybody that's joined us here tonight. And the only way we can find success to the project and satisfy the citizens is through open communication. So we will certainly endeavor to do our best to get those messages and information out to you. But on the other hand, we like to understand what's going on out there. So your communication to us, your comments and questions are extremely valuable. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Kyle, anything you want to add in before we close?
No, I think Mark hit the nail on the head there. As things roll along here and we get this project pushed out for tender and stuff, we'll be in touch through public notices with the residents immediately affected. There'll be contacts and on those notices. Feel free to give me a shout. My name will be on there for sure. So,
okay. Mr. Kulak.
Oh, I think everybody's heard enough from me tonight that we probably can move on. But I will just say, listen, just echoing what Mark had said, listen, we need to hear from residents. And I've been quite vocal about that if you want to have those conversations, we're always open to having those conversations. There's nothing to hide in this process, and so I encourage people to speak up.
I actually get another question here via email here while we were talking there, so I'll throw it out here because it's one from a resident that's asked this before. This is actually from Bill and Norma, who live on Ash Grove. Your question is, traveling from 34th Street East, where will the traffic be rerouted to when Phase 5 is being done? That's part one. And as we asked previously, and Kyle, you remember we had this conversation, when would the city be considering do some reconstruction on Little Ash Grove between Silver Birch and Willowdale? And that was part of the thing about the repaving you and I talked about there last week, and that because you had given me an answer I hadn't heard before. I just haven't got back to Bill and Norma yet about this, but you can maybe talk about that one. So first part, traveling from 34th Street East, where will traffic be rerouted to when Phase 5 is being done?
During phase 5, we'll actually be able to keep eastbound traffic moving through Willowdale. Actually eastbound will be unimpeded throughout the entire project. We'll either be flipping it over onto the westbound lanes, or they will travel on eastbound as regular. So.
Yeah, during Phase 5, it would be westbound Willowdale that would be closed. The only way to accommodate some of that traffic locally anyways would be south on 26 to Poplar.
Yeah.
And then west on Poplar through to Ash Grove. Is it Ash Grove? I'm not familiar enough with the city. I've been here long enough. Yeah, and back onto Willowdale. Otherwise, for through traffic on Willowdale, possibly Richmond. So we'll make a best effort at that time when we recognize when things need to be closed, how long they need to be closed, and we'll establish detour routes as required.
And part two of that, Kyle, was about the question about what we call Little Ash Grove, that little piece between Silver Birch and Willowdale, about the repaving or reconstruction. Again, we had this discussion. Maybe just share that with the residents there.
Yeah, the reason we left that off of the paving program last year was because of the water main condition. We're looking at replacing the water main on Silver Birch within the next 5 to 10 years. We'd like to include that section of Ash Grove at that time. So we are kind of delaying any road works.
I think you were talking, I think it was in the projected budget for roughly 2025 or something like that. Or whatever,
somewhere in there, yeah. I don't know the exact dates.
If conditions worsen there, is that something that maybe might get moved up a little bit quicker than that? Or I know we've done that with other projects, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are rough target dates, I guess, and we move them around accordingly.
Great, thank you.
We have another question in the chat from Cher. Will the culvert drainage repairs fix the flooding issues on 26th Street right by the train tracks? It's really bad there pretty much after every rain.
And I think just to elaborate, Cher's talking about the east side of 26th Street right by the tracks there where it gets really badly flooded when it rains hard.
Side or the north side?
It would be on the east side of 26, north side of the tracks. Almost right at the entrance where you go into Westfoot Physio and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, we are looking at replacing those catch basins as well as the outlet into the Willowdale ditch there on the southeast corner or southwest corner. Sorry.
So it's not as much the new pipe we're putting in, but rather how that drainage comes from the road into the ditch. Okay.
Kind of the lead.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that is a bad spot there. I know every time it rains, even 15, 20 mils, it gets flooded there pretty good there. So that's a good question. Not seeing any more, so while we're kind of waiting on that, I'm going to take a moment here again just to thank everybody that came tonight, all of the folks out there that actually participated either through the Teams meeting or by phone or even by watching it on WCG TV. Our thanks out to WCG TV for showing this live tonight. They will be replaying it periodically over the next week or two, I'm told, so people that maybe couldn't participate in the live one tonight at least can get the presentation and the information to show what exactly is going to be going on. You're just not able to call in, so ignore those numbers when you do see them come up in that. I'd like again to thank Patrick and Mark and Kyle, and especially Marilee and Pete for throwing this together on very short notice when our in-person meeting at the Keystone became a little bit in question and jeopardy because of all the COVID problems that are going on in the province and the further restrictions. So thank you guys very much for all the work you've done here in that. And Bruce, thanks very much for working the cameras tonight. I appreciate it greatly. And with that, if there are no more questions that I see coming up either on the phone or on the screen, I want to wish everybody a good night. Enjoy the nice weather we've had today and tomorrow because we're going to get it into the weekend, and I think it kind of dips up and down again a little bit. But thanks everyone for participating and attending tonight, and thanks again to all the city staff that helped out tonight, and have a good night.